I always thought my son would grow up to be a decent man, but his new wife changed him. Sitting in a five-star restaurant, watching her point at my youngest daughter and tell the waiter, "We're not paying for her," snapped something inside me. So I taught them a lesson. I'm a straightforward man. My name is Robert. For 35 years, I ran a commercial contracting business, waking up at 4:30 a.m., breathing in sawdust and drywall, and breaking my back so my family wouldn't have to. When my wife, Mary, passed away 12 years ago, it nearly broke me. But I kept going for the sake of our two kids, David and Emily. David is 30 now. He's my firstborn, the golden boy. Growing up, David never wanted for anything. If he wanted a car for his 16th birthday, I worked overtime to buy him a reliable sedan. If he needed tuition for a private university, I signed the checks. I loved him, but looking back, I realized my generosity created a man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. Emily, on the other hand, is 22. She was a late-in-life surprise for Mary and me, and she's the light of my life. Emily is studying nursing, working night shifts at a local diner to pay for her textbooks because she stubbornly refuses to take my money. "You've worked hard enough, Dad," she tells me. "Keep your retirement safe." The friction in our family didn't start until 2 years ago, when David married Chloe. Chloe was a nightmare wrapped in designer labels. She came from a family that liked to pretend they had money, meaning she was heavily in debt but obsessed with appearances. From the moment she entered our lives, she treated Emily like the help. She looked down on Emily's thrift store clothes, her sensible shoes, and her blue-collar work ethic. Chloe's favorite pastime was making subtle, passive-aggressive jabs at family gatherings, designed to make Emily feel small while elevating herself. And David just let it happen. He'd laugh nervously and look away, too whipped by his wife's demands to stand up for his little sister. For the most part, I kept my mouth shut to keep the peace, but a father's patience has limits. The incident that changed everything began with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. David called me while I was out tending to my garden. "Dad," David said, his voice carrying that faux confidence he always adopted when Chloe was listening in the background. "My 30th birthday is this weekend. Chloe and I want to take you out to celebrate." A real celebration. We scored reservations at L'Étoile d'Or. I raised my eyebrows. L'Étoile d'Or was a Michelin-starred French restaurant downtown, the kind of place where a side of asparagus costs more than a tank of gas. It was notoriously exclusive. "Doctor, that's a generous offer, David," I said cautiously. Usually when David and Chloe invited me out, I miraculously ended up with the bill because they forgot their wallets or their card mysteriously declined. "We insist," David said. "We want to treat you. You've done so much for us. It's our treat." "All right," I agreed. "I'd love to come. What time should Emily and I be ready?" There was a long pause on the line. I could hear muffled whispering. The unmistakable, sharp tone of Chloe's voice hissed something in the background. Yeah," David stammered. "Emily. Right. Bring her along. Our reservation is at 8. Friday evening arrived. I wore my best tailored suit, a relic from my days of attending city council meetings for zoning permits, but it still fit perfectly. Emily came downstairs looking beautiful in a simple, elegant navy blue dress she had bought from a vintage shop. She looked nervous. "Do I look okay, Dad?" she asked, smoothing the fabric. "I know Chloe is going to be dressed to the nines. I don't want to embarrass you. You could wear a potato sack and still be the classiest woman in that room, sweetheart," I told her, kissing her forehead. We drove downtown and handed the keys to the valet outside L'Étoile d'Or. The restaurant was breathtakingly pretentious. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. The tables were draped in heavy white linen, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. The hostess led us to a prime booth near the window. David and Chloe were already there. Chloe was wearing a shimmering gold dress that looked like it cost 3 months of Emily's rent. She had a new diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. When she saw us, her smile was tight and practiced. "Robert, you look dashing," Chloe said, offering a stiff hug. Then her eyes flicked to Emily. She looked Emily up and down, her gaze pausing on Emily's plain black heels. "Oh, Emily, you wore that charming little dress. How resourceful. I suppose it works, for the lighting in here." Emily's face flushed pink. "Happy birthday, David," she said quietly, ignoring the jab. David gave her a half-hearted, one-armed hug. "Thanks, Em. Glad you could make it." We sat down. The tension at the table was immediate. I could see Chloe bristling at Emily's mere presence. Chloe loved to play the wealthy socialite, and she felt Emily ruined her aesthetic. I took a deep breath, determined not to ruin my son's birthday. I picked up the leather-bound menu, fully prepared to enjoy a nice steak and a quiet evening. But Chloe had other plans. She had brought us here to make a statement, and she was about to spring a trap that she had clearly been plotting all week. Before we even had a chance to look at the appetizers, our waiter approached the table. He was a tall, impeccably groomed man with a crisp white apron. His name tag read, Jean-Paul. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Jean-Paul said, his accent thick and polished. "Welcome to L'Étoile d'Or. May I start you off with some sparkling water or perhaps a cocktail while you peruse the menu?" "We'll take a bottle of your finest sparkling water," Chloe declared smoothly, taking control of the table. "And Jean-Paul, before we begin, I want to clarify how the bill will be handled tonight to avoid any confusion later." Jean-Paul nodded graciously. "Of course, madame. How would you like it arranged?" Chloe leaned forward, resting her diamond-clad wrists on the table. She looked directly at me with a sickeningly sweet smile, but her voice was loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "We are treating my father-in-law tonight for my husband's birthday," Chloe announced proudly. "So, please, put his orders on our tab." "Very generous. One check for the table then?" Jean-Paul asked, making a note on his pad. "No," Chloe said sharply. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. She pointed an acrylic nail directly at Emily. "We are not paying for her. Put her on a completely separate check. She's an adult. She can manage her own finances." The table went dead silent. The string quartet in the background seemed to suddenly fade out. Emily physically shrank back into the leather booth. The color drained completely from her face. She looked down at her hands, her eyes instantly welling up with tears. She knew, and Chloe knew, that a single entree at this restaurant cost more than what Emily made in 3 shifts at the diner. It was a deliberate, calculated humiliation. David stared hard at the tablecloth, suddenly finding the weave of the linen incredibly interesting. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend his sister. He just sat there like a coward. I felt a surge of rage so intense it made my vision blur at the edges. My hands gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. For a split second, I was ready to stand up, throw my napkin in Chloe's face, drag my son by his ear out to the street, and take my daughter home. But I looked at Chloe. She was glowing with a smug, triumphant satisfaction. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to blow up so she could play the victim. Or, more likely, she expected me to sigh, pull out my platinum card and say, "Never mind, I'll just pay for everyone." That was her real game. She didn't want to pay for me either. She wanted to create an incredibly awkward situation so that I would just take the entire bill to save Emily the embarrassment. It was the same scam they always pulled, just wrapped in a viciously cruel package. I took a slow, deep breath, reining in the fire in my chest. Note. "Is that so, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "You and David are treating me to anything I want tonight, but Emily is on her own?" "That's right, Robert," Chloe said, raising her chin. "We believe in personal responsibility. Emily needs to learn how to live within her means. If she can't afford a high-end dining experience, she shouldn't have tagged along. But you? You're our guest of honor. I looked at David. You agree with this, son? David refused to meet my eyes. It's just how we budgeted it, Dad. Sorry, Em. I see, I said. I reached over and placed my hand gently over Emily's trembling fingers. Don't worry, sweetheart, I told her quietly. I'll cover your check. Order whatever your heart desires. Emily swallowed hard, giving me a weak nod. Then I turned back to Jean-Paul, who was standing perfectly still, pretending he hadn't just witnessed a spectacular family implosion. Jean-Paul, I said, offering the waiter a warm, relaxed smile. The terms are clear. I am the guest of my son and daughter-in-law. My daughter's check will come to me. Now, I understand you have a reserve wine list that isn't on the standard menu. May I see it? Jean-Paul's eyes lit up with a flash of professional excitement. Right away, monsieur. When Jean-Paul scurried off, Chloe chuckled, totally oblivious to the storm gathering above her head. Oh, Robert, you don't have to go crazy just because we're paying, but a nice glass of Cabernet would be lovely, wouldn't it? A glass? I mused, opening my napkin and laying it across my lap. Chloe, you said it yourself. This is a real celebration. We need a proper bottle. Jean-Paul returned, bearing a heavy, leather-bound tome with gold leaf pages. He handed it to me with a slight bow. I opened it and bypassed the first 20 pages. I knew wine. My late wife, Mary, had been an avid collector before she got sick, and I retained the knowledge. We are celebrating a 30th birthday, I announced to the table. A milestone. It requires a vintage of equal weight. I pointed to a line item on the page. Jean-Paul, we will start with the 1,990 Louis Roederer Cristal Brut. And for the main course, bring us the 1,982 Chateau Petrus. Jean-Paul's eyes widened to the size of saucers. The 82 Petrus, monsieur. An exquisite choice. Truly exceptional. Jean-Paul's. Wait, David said, his brow furrowing slightly. Dad, I don't really know wines. How much is that? Before I could answer, Chloe swatted David's arm playfully. Oh, hush, David, don't be tacky. It's a nice bottle. Let your father enjoy himself. We're celebrating your success. She leaned toward me. Is the Petrus good, Robert? It's unforgettable, I replied smoothly. I didn't mention that the Cristal was 2,500, or that the 82 Petrus was currently listed in the book at 9,500. Chloe was so desperate to look like a high roller, she hadn't bothered to ask for the prices. She assumed I was ordering a couple of $100 bottles. The dinner order proceeded. Emily, still shaken but feeling safer under my protection, quietly ordered a pan-seared chicken breast and a side salad. Chloe and David, emboldened by their own arrogance, ordered like kings. Chloe got the main lobster thermidor. David ordered the A5 Wagyu ribeye. And for you, monsieur, Jean-Paul asked me. I'll start with the beluga caviar service, I said calmly. Then, the white truffle risotto. Please, don't be shy with the shavings. For my entree, I'll also have the A5 Wagyu, but I'd like to add the seared foie gras on top. Oh, and a side of the butter-poached crab. Chloe actually pulled out her phone to start taking pictures for her social media. She was thrilled. She was sitting in a Michelin star restaurant, surrounded by caviar and champagne, acting like she was footing the bill for a lavish lifestyle. She snapped a photo of me holding the crystal flute of $2,500 champagne and posted it, probably with a caption about being a generous daughter-in-law. As the hours passed, the food arrived in perfect orchestrated waves. The caviar was magnificent. The truffle risotto was rich and earthy. The Petrus, when carefully decanted and poured, tasted like liquid velvet. I savored every single bite, making a show of clinking my glass against David's. To 30 years, David, I toasted, looking my son dead in the eye, and to the lessons we learn along the way. Cheers, Dad, David smiled, completely oblivious to the impending disaster. Emily stayed quiet, eating her chicken, her eyes occasionally darting to me with a mixture of confusion and awe. She knew me well enough to know I was never this extravagant unless I was making a point. By the time the dessert plates were cleared after I had ordered a $400 glass of Louis XIII of cognac to digest my meal, the restaurant had begun to empty out. The string quartet had packed up their instruments. It was time. Jean-Paul approached the table, carrying 2 sleek black leather billfolds. The moment of truth had arrived. Jean-Paul approached the table with the grace of a seasoned professional, carrying 2 sleek black leather billfolds. He placed the thinner one gently in front of me and set the thicker, noticeably heavier one squarely in front of David. "Your checks, as requested," Jean-Paul said, giving a polite nod before stepping back into the shadows to give us privacy. Chloe practically snatched the billfold from in front of David. She was still riding the high of her own perceived generosity, eager to see the total so she could casually complain about it later to her friends. She opened the leather cover with a flourish, pulling out the itemized receipt. I sat back, steepling my fingers, and watched her face. It happened in slow motion. First, Chloe's smug smile faltered, the corners of her mouth drooping. Then, her eyes widened, darting back and forth across the printed lines, as if she had suddenly forgotten how to read. Finally, all the blood drained from her face, leaving her a sickly, chalky white. She looked like she had just seen a ghost, or worse, the Grim Reaper himself coming to collect. This is a mistake," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. David, look at this." David leaned over, his brow furrowing. As his eyes hit the bottom line of the receipt, he physically recoiled, knocking his water glass over. It shattered against the table, spilling ice and water over the white linen, but neither of them cared. David was hyperventilating. 14,000? David gasped, his voice cracking like a teenager's. $14,370? For dinner? "Excuse me, waiter, Jean-Paul!" Chloe shrieked, entirely abandoning her aristocratic facade. Her shrill voice echoed through the quiet dining room. Jean-Paul materialized instantly, a towel in hand to dab at the spilled water. "Is there an issue with the check, madame?" "Yes, there is an issue," she hissed, jabbing her acrylic nail into the receipt. "You charged us for a $9,000 bottle of wine and a $2,000 bottle of champagne. We didn't order this. You've brought us the wrong table's bill." "I assure you, madame, the bill is correct," Jean-Paul replied, his tone remaining effortlessly calm. "The gentleman ordered the 1,990 Louis Roederer Cristal and the 1,982 Chateau Petrus. As per your explicit instructions at the beginning of the evening, all of the gentleman's orders were placed on your tab." Chloe whipped her head toward me, her eyes manic. "Robert, what did you do?" she demanded. I slowly opened my own billfold. Inside was the charge for Emily's pan-seared chicken, her side salad, and a tap water. "I did exactly what you told me to do, Chloe," I said smoothly, reaching into my breast pocket and pulling out my reading glasses. "You wanted to treat me to a real celebration. I ordered a meal fitting for such a generous offer. But you didn't tell us it was that expensive?" David stammered, pulling at his collar as if the restaurant was suddenly out of oxygen. "Dad, we can't pay this. My debit card has a daily limit of 2,000. Chloe's credit cards are maxed out from the wedding." "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. But Chloe was so adamant earlier. "What was the phrase you used, Chloe?" "Ah, yes. We believe in personal responsibility. If you can't afford a high-end dining experience, you shouldn't have tagged along. Chloe's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She realized, with crushing clarity, that her own trap had just snapped shut on her leg. "Dad, please," David begged, his eyes welling with panic. "You have to help us. You're a millionaire. You can pay this off without blinking. Please, put it on your card." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the boy I had bought a car for, the boy whose tuition I had paid, the man who had sat silently while his wife tried to humiliate his hard-working sister over a $50 chicken dinner. "No," I said, flatly. The silence that followed my refusal was deafening. Even Jean-Paul seemed to hold his breath. "What do you mean, no?" Chloe shrieked, her voice dropping all pretense of manners. "You're his father. You're just going to let us sit here and get arrested?" I am his father, yes, and as a father, I have clearly failed to teach him the value of a dollar, the importance of loyalty to his family, and the basic concept of respect, I replied, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the heavy, gravelly tone I used to use on construction sites when a contractor tried to cut corners. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. "You brought us here tonight not to celebrate David, but to flex a bank account you don't possess," I continued, looking dead into Chloe's eyes. "You deliberately tried to make Emily feel worthless because she works for a living, instead of putting everything on plastic like you do. You thought you could use my money to subsidize your luxury while treating my daughter like dirt. Well, the ride is over." I pulled a black titanium American Express card from my wallet and handed it to Jean-Paul. "Jean-Paul, please charge my daughter's meal to this card," I said politely, "and add a $2,000 tip for yourself. Your service tonight and your discretion have been spectacular." "Thank you, Monsieur Robert," Jean-Paul said, bowing deeply. "You are most generous." "You can't do this," David cried, actually standing up and grabbing my sleeve. "Dad, they're going to call the police. They're going to arrest us for theft of services." I gently but firmly removed David's hand from my arm. "Then you had better figure out a payment plan, son," I told him. "Call Chloe's parents. Have them put a second mortgage on that house they love bragging about." Or maybe Chloe can leave that new diamond tennis bracelet with the manager as collateral. I hear personal responsibility is a great teacher. I turned to Emily. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and profound admiration. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" I asked her. "Yes, Dad," she whispered, grabbing her small clutch purse and standing tall beside me. We didn't look back as we walked out of L'Etoile d'Or. As the heavy glass doors swung shut behind us, I could hear the restaurant manager, a stern-looking man in a tuxedo, marching over to David and Chloe's table. The drive home was quiet. Emily sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing city lights. Finally, she turned to me. "Dad, was that too harsh?" she asked softly. $14,000 is a lot of money." "Emily, listen to me," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "Money is just paper. It comes and it goes. What matters is character. David has let that woman strip him of his backbone. If I had paid that bill, I would have just been reinforcing their delusion. I would have been telling them that it's okay to treat you like garbage because Daddy will always be there to foot the bill. I'm not doing it anymore." Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for defending me. I've never seen anyone put Chloe in her place like that. She earned every penny of that lesson." I chuckled grimly. The fallout from that night was biblical. I learned through the family grapevine exactly how David and Chloe managed to escape the restaurant without leaving in handcuffs. They didn't have the cash, and their cards declined exactly as David had panicked about. Here is what they had to do. The humbling calls. They had to sit in the manager's office for 2 hours, calling every relative they had. Chloe's parents, who were swimming in their own debt, couldn't help. The collateral. Chloe had to hand over her diamond tennis bracelet and her designer watch just to get out the door, signing a legally binding promissory note to the restaurant. The fire sale. Over the next week, to pay off the remaining balance and get her jewelry back, Chloe had to sell her designer handbags online at a massive loss. David had to sell his golf clubs and his motorcycle. They were furious with me, of course. For 6 months, David didn't speak to me. He sent angry text messages calling me vindictive and cruel. I never responded with anger. I only replied, "When you are ready to be a man and apologize to your sister, my door is open." Eventually, reality set in for David. Without my financial safety net, the stress of Chloe's spending habits began to crush him. The lavish lifestyle she demanded was impossible to maintain. 9 months after the dinner at L'Étoile d'Or, David moved out of their upscale apartment and into a small studio. He came to my house on a rainy Sunday afternoon. He looked exhausted, older, but for the first time in years, he looked grounded. Emily was in the kitchen studying for her nursing exams. David walked in, took off his wet jacket, and looked at both of us. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry. To both of you. I was a coward, and I let her treat you terribly, Em. Dad, you were right. About everything." Emily stood up and hugged her big brother. I walked over and put a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Welcome back, son," I told him. David and Chloe finalized their divorce earlier this year. David is currently working extra shifts to rebuild his savings, and he's learning, slowly but surely, how to stand on his own 2 feet. Emily graduated with top honors and is now an ER nurse, entirely debt-free. As for me, I still tend to my garden, I still wear my old suits, and I still love my children fiercely. But I learned a valuable lesson of my own. Sometimes, the most loving thing a father can do is let his kids pick up their own tab. If you enjoyed this story of a father serving up some much-needed karma, hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a little family justice. Dealing with entitled relatives is never easy, but setting boundaries is so important. What would you have done in Robert's shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more crazy, real-life drama stories every single week.